Ki Jai. So let's start with the message from Lonavla. Ashokji, over to you.
Yes, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. How to love God? To love God is the in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our dear ones, we love God. 1. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. 2. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. 3. If we suffer in the suffering of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. 4. If instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many, many others, we are loving God. 5. If we endure a lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. 6. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. 7. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and to find Him as our own self.
Avtar
Bhai
Meher
Meher
Baba.
Baba, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Okay, so we celebrated birthday last week, and then we're back to our normal schedules from today. So we go back to where is Trello? Yeah, so we start from page. We had stopped at page 55, and we start from the section which is called "When the Time is Right." So let me start with that. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. When the time is right. To quicken this divine love in humanity on a mass scale is always the function of the avatar. Being divinely conscious of man's need and having the power to fulfill that need, he spares neither himself nor others the necessary pain to achieve the desired end. There is a price to be paid for every attainment, and the supreme attainment is no exception. For the quickening of consciousness, all the forces in the unconscious, both good and bad, must be released. Old established traditions and accepted concepts which have encased man's spirit for ages must be demolished. New collective images and evaluations must be born. Living, growing, maturing is no child's play, and in endeavoring to achieve this end, one may well find himself at war with himself or with others. This inner and outer conflict the master deliberately fosters, but he does it in the spirit of utmost compassion, for he knows that without the complete purging of the congested tendencies and desires deep rooted in our inner being, no spiritual regeneration is possible. He knows that the psychological warp in the average person makes him shrink from facing the most negative and corroding tendencies in his makeup. That only through precipitation of acute inner crisis can even the most earnest seeker be forced to face the pressing issues of his psyche and thus create the opportunity of dissolving them.
Wow, this is too powerful.
The paragraph, right? It's
It's
amazing.
too powerful. So well
And
written,
and
articulated,
so well written.
and
Correct.
it has it has got such a wide expanse, if I can use that word, covers too many things in one paragraph. It's really beautiful.
Absolutely. And very well written, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Thus
Yeah,
create an opportunity of dissolving them. That's
correct.
the words. Yeah, beautiful.
Yes,
So all the crisis in our life is an opportunity to dissolve our kind of
absolutely.
yeah psyche, or like the screwed up psyche actually.
Correct.
Screwed up. I said screwed up. Jai Baba.
Granted.
Yeah, yeah. Jai Baba. That's for
Jai
records.
Baba.
Yeah.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba. So for Meher Baba, in being the perfect master, is also the master psychologist whose consummate skill ferrets out the well concealed skeletons in the most hidden recesses of our being and brings them into the sunlight of our consciousness. Baba knows that only by such means can man be made so acutely, so overwhelmingly conscious of his deepest spiritual needs that he will at last be ready to relinquish the distracting toys and trinkets of his sham existence for the greater and lasting values of immortal life. Wonderful. So, again, I love this true values, lasting values, greater values usage, which initially I discovered in Meher Baba in discourses, but I just love it. So she's used it beautifully here. I'll read the last line again. Baba knows that only by such means can man be made so acutely, so overwhelmingly conscious of his deepest spiritual needs that he will at last be ready to relinquish the distracting toys and trinkets of his sham existence for the greater and lasting values of immortal life. Amazing. Next section is cosmic catharsis. In the light of this teaching, such a catastrophe as the recent World War takes on a new meaning, a spiritually purposeful one. On his first visit to America in 1931, 8 years before the world had been plunged into its cleansing bloodbath, 2 years before Hitler's rise to power, Baba had foretold all the events which have since come to pass. He had also predicted that a kind of armistice or seeming victory would bring hostilities to an end, but would only be a lull before an even greater storm breaks. When, however, man has come to the end of his own resources, to the recognition that shifting the balance of power from one nation to another will not solve the problems, when through bitter anguish all the nations of the world awaken to the fact that only through God's grace will man be able to accept all men as his brothers, then Baba predicts that the consciousness of mankind will be quickened, raised to a higher level. He states that the breaking of his long self imposed silence, now in its 21st year, will be the signal for this momentous cosmic happening, which will lift man's awareness from the plane of reason to that of intuition, from self consciousness to soul consciousness. Comparable in importance to this great step in the evolution of consciousness was the transition from the animal to the human kingdom, from the plane of instinct to that of reason. For more than a quarter of century, Baba's disciples have been witnessing the fulfillment of his prophecies. It is not surprising, therefore, that they believe this supreme prediction of his will also will come to pass. It's not surprising, therefore, that they believe this supreme prediction of his will also come to pass when, in Baba's words, the time for man's release is ripe. Even hard boiled reporters, whose ultra sophisticated attitude towards spiritual teachers is notorious, have at times found themselves unable to resist the impact of Baba's integrity. I recall an incident in India on Christmas Day 1937 when a reporter T.A. Raman of the Evening News of India came to Baba's Western ashram at Nasik to interview him. In response to the reporter's questions, Baba repeated his prediction of the global Holocaust, which has since engulfed the world. The reporter shot back with an undertone of sarcasm. So, that, sir, is your opinion. Smiling, Baba answered, my son, I have no opinion. I know. Wow. And strange as it may seem to the Western reader who has had no contact with such egoless omniscience, the effect was electric. The cynical journalist left Baba's presence in a much sobered mood. Something he had never before encountered must have punctured his hardened shell, for his full-page story in the news of January 7th, 1938, lacked all the flippancy of his interview. He writes, in part, and she quotes, shorn of the trappings of mysticism and platitude, there is much in the teaching of Meher Baba which the world badly needs to be told. The peace which he himself seems to have attained is undeniable, nor can one gainsay the charm and the sincerity of his personality. The time to preach in the marketplace will come, says Meher Baba, but only after the world has been humbled and purified by a carnage greater than any the world has yet seen. That's end quotes. This is the prediction which won headlines for Meher Baba the world over and which has been so terribly fulfilled. But it is important to remember that Meher Baba predicted this war for years, immediately following the last armistice, when another such war seemed impossible. I think armistice is nothing but another word for ceasefire. Chapter 3, Genesis. So now we're back to um, biographical aspects in depth. After Meher Baba left Sakori and Upasani Maharaj in 1922, he stayed for a fortnight with a friend in Bombay. From there, he moved to the outskirts of Pune, where, at his request, a small thatched hut 6 feet by 10 feet had been built for him. When asked why he subjected himself to such enforced discomfort, though he was spiritually perfect and beyond all need of physical self discipline, he explained that the physical confinement was only apparent, not real to him. It does not inconvenience me, for walls do not bind me. For certain kinds of work which I have to do in non physical realms, I prefer to shut myself up in a small place. It was for the same reason that Jesus, after attaining perfection, stayed for 30 continuous days on a mountain where he did not allow even his intimate disciples to approach him. There are times, particularly when he is deeply immersed in inner work, that Baba also forbids anyone to touch him or even to come within a distance of 6 feet of him. Only those who have lived in intimate proximity to the Master know that such stipulations are as much for the safety of his disciples as for any other reason. So powerful is the spiritual voltage in his body at such periods. He lived in the circumscribed hut for about 5 months, with his disciples ministering to his physical needs. Very early in the morning, generally at 4, his breakfast was brought to him. At 9 o'clock, he would receive Hindu devotees who would stay for an hour chanting ancient religious songs and playing Hindu musical instruments. At 10:30, he left the hut for his mother's house where he had dinner. Then, after a short rest, he would return to his small abode. In the afternoon, he glanced at the headlines of the newspapers, and this is the extent of Baba's reading of newspapers, to see how closely outer world events were conforming to his inner direction. He then remained alone in his hut until the evening. when his disciples and friends entertained him with music and song, while Baba, following the Indian custom, would serve sweets and talk of things spiritual. At 9 o'clock, his supper was brought to him, after which no one was permitted to approach him or even to come near the hut, except the one disciple whose duty it was to stay on guard with him all night. The perfect master does not sleep in the ordinary sense. He never becomes unconscious. His apparent sleep is simply the voluntary withdrawal from the conscious plane to the superconscious. The rest he derives in this way is the rest he derives in this way is only relative, for even on the celestial plane he is constantly active. During this period, the master requires the wakeful presence of a trusted companion to protect his body from the subtle onslaughts of disincarnate spirits who try to draw near him, but whose disturbing intrusion is prevented by the proximity of a waking consciousness. Okay, I never knew this exact description or the reason for uh, a night watchman that Baba had all the time. So, a waking consciousness in proximity helps um, from other discarnate spirits coming. Interesting. Okay. Uh, Divine magnet.
I think we can like compare it with a lightning arrestor,
Correct. Yeah.
So you have that lightning arrestor where the
Yeah. Yeah.
lightning takes
Yeah. So
takes that
basically, it
back.
takes the load. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also maybe these disincarnate spirits need solitude of the master to approach.
Yeah.
So the moment there's somebody else, it just
Yeah.
yeah,
So he is not disturbed.
correct, correct. And we know we have heard through the stories of the Mandali and even the accounts that Baba actually never slept, right? So even with the night watchman, if the night watchman falls asleep, it was Baba who was waking them up, right?
Correct, correct.
He used to, use his clap and check
Yes, yes.
check on the night watchman who's awake, who I mean, who's
So
supposed to be awake.
disturbance in a sense of his work, not in the sleep sense,
Correct,
but
correct, correct,
yeah.
correct, correct, correct. That's correct.
Jai Baba, self-realized souls never go to sleep physically the way we ordinary human souls do. They just take rest, but they are always aware and awake. Jai Baba.
Correct. Consciousness has enveloped unconsciousness. Whereas we play the game of sleeping. Yeah, we go to sleep state. Okay, divine magnet. In the early days of his mastership, Baba's method of gathering to him those who were destined to become his disciples was as natural as it was effective. One of those early followers was Dr. Ghani, who tells us how Baba would have tea with him at a Parsi restaurant at Pune and, in all seriousness, ask his opinion on political questions, giving rapt attention to his answers. Only through subsequent experience with Baba did Dr. Ghani realize that Baba's feigned absorption in politics derived from his deeper interest in Dr. Ghani himself. It was, of course, Baba's way of reaching down to the level of those whom he would help, and this he did with sympathetic friendliness and loving interchange of thought, occasionally highlighted with some profound spiritual truth when he knew the hearer was ready to receive it. He made no claim of being God realized, nor sought to bind people to him except by the naturally attracting power of divine love. But gradually his friends became disciples through their growing insight, which conveyed to them his true spiritual stature. Through this same power of divine love, Baba held these first disciples close to him during long years of severe testing and tempering. Ghani's experience of what happened when he had gradually been drawn closer into Baba's orbit and inspired to obey his instructions implicitly is an illuminating example of the quality of the master's testing technique. The doctor who bears a striking resemblance to Socrates, as his image has come down to us from ancient Greece, had been a successful homeopathic physician, founder head of his own dispensary in Bombay before he became Baba's disciple. One day, the master advised him to dust and sweep out the whole clinic himself instead of hiring servants to do it for a period of 6 months. Such a practice, Baba assured him, would be of great benefit to him spiritually. So the good doctor carried out Baba's instructions literally, with the result that he swept his medical establishment utterly out of existence. Through a series of complicated events, the clinic had passed out of his hands by the end of the 6 month period. At first, he was much puzzled, but eventually the priceless benefits of this uprooting became clear to him. It freed him to give himself wholly to Baba's service and thus attain a spiritual development which he could not otherwise have achieved. Another amusing instance of the baffling manner in which Baba so often achieves his suprapersonal ends is the saga of Ramju's shop. This handsome, charming young Mohammedan had reached the point in his novitiate where he desired to surrender his life to Baba. Just one thing seemed to stand in the way of that final step: his dry goods shop. He would have to sell it before he and his family could move to the locality of Baba's headquarters. Ramju asked for Baba's help. Do just one thing. Until the shop is sold, Baba instructed him, say to everybody you meet, before you say anything else, I have not yet sold my shop. That seemed very simple, and Ramju promised to carry out the instruction faithfully. Things did not work out as he, however, things did not, however, work out as he had anticipated. The simple formula of repeating, I have not yet sold my shop, grew very burdensome not only for Ramju, but for his family and friends. Every morning, upon first seeing his wife or his father in law, he must greet them or return their greeting with, I have not yet sold my shop, which of course they knew. When the days grew into weeks and he still persisted in repeating his odd greeting, they began to wonder about his sanity. His friends looked upon him with pity. They too believed he was losing his mind. He found himself crossing the street to avoid them if they did not see him first and avoid him. He invented what he hoped would alter the monotone of his salutation, make it sound more natural. Beautiful day. I have not yet sold my shop. As the weeks passed, Ramju came to shun human contacts more and more. He, the jovial, gregarious friend of many, was becoming a recluse. One morning, to top it all, word arrived that one of his uncles had died, which means the inevitable. One morning, to top it all, the word arrived that one of his uncles had died, which meant the inevitability of his attending the funeral. Ramju dreaded the day. The prospect of facing an army of bereaved relatives, many of whom he had not seen for months, with the salutation, I have not yet sold my shop, was more than he could bear. He would not attend that funeral. He would pretend to be ill and send his message of sympathy to the bereaved family through his wife. So when the day arrived, he remained in bed until he was quite sure that the funeral was over. Then he rose, dressed himself, and glad to have succeeded in his ruse, walked toward his shop. After proceeding leisurely for a few blocks, he suddenly found himself, to his horror, in the very path of his uncle's funeral procession. It was coming straight toward him. He could not possibly avoid it. As is the custom at Mohammedan funerals, he had to touch the coffin with his shoulder, then offer his condolences to every one of the sorrowing relatives, preceded by the wholly irrelevant statement, I have not yet sold my shop. When Ramju told his story to Baba, the master shook with laughter and then revoked the order. The aftermath of this serio comic episode was that the shop was never sold. the merchandise had finally to be auctioned off. When I met Ramju in India, I asked him what effect this experience had upon him. He told me that there were multiple effects. It wiped out his concern for other people's opinion of his actions. Formerly, it had mattered greatly what people thought about him. Now, if he knew himself in the right, he no longer cared what their reaction was. He had many friends, had belonged to a number of societies and fraternal orders. He had been popular and loved it. But none of this was now important. The shop had been a materialistic millstone around his spiritual neck, and its loss had gained him his one great desire to dedicate his life to the service of the Master. He was functioning from a new center, a true center, in which his ego no longer needed to be fed by the good opinion of his friends. That was the primary result. Prior to this experience, Baba had said to him one day, I have many powers and can help you in many ways. For example, I can prosper you in your business, harmonize your relationships, give you health and strength, and I will grant you any request of that nature which you might ask. But before you ask, let me tell you the best thing for you would be to ask nothing, to leave everything to me and promise to obey me in whatever I command. Ramju chose to obey masters. Ramju chose to obey Baba's orders. The resultant tribulations, which, when they occurred, often seemed cruel, now, many years later, give him too a hearty laugh, and he thanks his guardian angels for having inspired him to choose so wisely. So, I'll probably take a break from my reading. My throat is bothering me, but maybe we'll also take a pause and talk about any of the Mandali stories that you remember of Ramju and Ghani. Ghani is something. Is it, by the way, is somebody who has read the name in Hindi? Is it Ghani or is it Ghani?
And I have heard Ghani only.
Ghani only. Okay.
And I think Ghani was from Lonavala, where Ashokji
Oh,
is cut today.
oh, is it? Okay.
If
Interesting.
I'm not wrong, yeah.
Okay, he's dropped off. But
Yeah.
recently we were talking about Ghani, and then I was also listening to a few videos about him. He was famous for his super smartness. I mean, so much so that
Yeah.
Baba acknowledged he was one of the smartest people,
Mhm.
especially on Islamic spirit. I mean, the
Yes.
Sufi spirituality and principles,
Yes. Yes.
and also just for being a very good author, right? So Baba used
Yes.
to like his writing, but he was also infamous for being lazy. So,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and there are amusing episodes linked to his laziness. So he used to hate.
Yes.
I mean, at the same time, he was also very caring about his appearance. So he used to always love to dress up and love to dress up in a suit.
Both. Yes.
Suit, yeah. And he used to sleep in a suit because he was lazy to get up and get dressed. And he used to hate bathing. So when the Mandalis, I mean, when his turn came to bathe, he would go into a bathroom and just throw the water around on the walls so that it sounds like somebody's having a shower. And then he'd come out and say, "It had one."
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I mean,
Very,
I'm
very
struggling.
close friend of Baba. He was older
Yes.
than Baba.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, and the most famous of his poems becomes the New Life song. Nayi
Oh, okay. I
Zindagi Ka
didn't know that.
Dukana. That's what Abdul Ghani. Baba only asked him to write, and Baba gave him the initial thoughts, and then he wrote the song. And it was first made ready in Belgaum
Okay.
because as soon as the New Life journey started, Baba was first halt was in Belgaum, if you
Okay.
remember. Yeah, and then there this song came up. Ghani. Yeah, yeah, Baba.
Lovely. So it's very interesting how, and I think Baba was always disappointed at the pace and intended output that he wanted from Gunny, but he could never get his laziness to go away. And sadly, I think he did not expect the level of contribution in converting his thoughts and notes into books and manuscripts that could be published that Baba would have desired. And I think he died in the 50s. So he died much
Yes,
before,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So very interesting personality. Okay, so
Hi, Baba. There's one more anecdote. Um, can you hear me?
sure, sure, please go
Hello.
ahead. Yeah, yeah, we can.
Yeah. So with Ghani, one of the other things was when God Speaks was being dictated by Baba. Actually, Ghani was the first guy who was given all the notes, and Ghani then somehow did not compile it, and then I'm not able to remember the details, but Baba had to recreate the God Speaks again with the Erich, you know, and it is one of the most difficult things that I've ever observed. That Baba had to dictate all over again. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he had finished. The script of God Speaks, but definitely the Sufi aspect on the supplement of God Speaks was compiled by Ghani, and but Ghani was supposed to finished a manuscript for Baba, but then he passed away during the new life or after the new life. So that was a tragedy. And there is some uh, uh, article on this in Glow magazine, I believe. And the other part was I wanted to mention when you were talking about um, Ramju and what Baba tells him uh, in terms of what you ask from a Sadguru or what you shouldn't ask. And I think I want to read again the gifts of love, which is there in everything and nothing, where he compares, because it's not just about loving Baba, it is about love, obedience, surrender, sacrifice. So just to recapitulate, gifts of love, it goes like this: greater than love is obedience, greater than obedience is surrender. Love is a gift from God to man. Obedience is a gift from master to man. Surrender is a gift from man to master. Love seeks union with the beloved. Obedience seeks the pleasure of the beloved. Surrender seeks nothing. And I think this surrender seeks nothing is where Baba is saying, don't ask for anything to with me, because he knows what we need. The other
Mm.
one is one who loves is the lover of the beloved. One who obeys is the beloved of the beloved. One who surrenders has no existence other than the beloved. Then one who loves desires the will of the beloved. One who obeys does the will of the beloved. One who surrenders knows nothing but the will of the beloved. All three arise out of and remain contained in the ocean of divine love. Jai Baba.
Wow.
Lovely, lovely,
Beautiful.
very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and also very,
One
very relevant.
one
Go
more
ahead.
thing that I recall is I think it was Ghani who was with Baba when Baba met Sai Baba, and Sai Baba
Oh,
was on a walk and shouted to Baba as Parvardigar Ho. So Ghani was a witness to that, and Hirach in his talk says that he heard the whole story from Ghani. Yeah, Baba.
the Lendi walk and the
Yeah,
Parvardigar. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, so we can rotate the reading if any one of you wants to read for a few minutes. Sunil or Sanjay or Kama, you can read too if you're not walking around.
I'll go next, Karthik.
Okay.
15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'll read. I'll read. Yeah.
Please, Jai Baba.
So start from here. First ashram. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. In May 1922, Baba left Pune for Bombay, where he inaugurated his first ashram. With him went 25 followers, of
45.
whom 45 followers, of whom 12 were Mohammedans, 11 Zoroastrians, and remainder Hindus. At night, one by one, the party visited Babajan under her lime tree at Pune to pay homage to the great soul before starting on this spiritually significant journey. On arrival in Bombay, they leased a spacious bungalow on Main Road, Dadar, a suburb of Bombay, which was known as Manzil-e-Meem, the house of the master. It contained 15 rooms, which were entirely devoid of furniture. Even the quilts and mattresses from the bedding rolls were under Baba's orders removed, leaving only blankets for covering and as slim protection against the hardness of the floor. Mosquito curtains were taped and tacked to the floor and walls of the sleeping rooms to be kept out of dangerous carriers of malaria. In the beginning, Baba took pains to keep alive their devotion and enthusiasm, while at the same time he prepared them for the reaction which he knew would follow by explaining that an aspirant of the spiritual path must pass through three mental stages: enthusiasm, indifference, despair. When disappointment or despair reach their peak, then a crisis occurs. To circumvent the effects of developments which the master knew to be inevitable, he enjoined his disciples never to leave him. He, he enjoined his disciples never to leave him, no matter what the provocation may be. The poet Hafiz, no doubt, had this same thought in mind when he wrote, "The path of love seemed to be an easy and comfortable one in the beginning, but now I know better. Is surcharged with unimagined difficulties, trials, and tribulations." The rules of the ashram were strict and included a number of orders, which radically changed the habits of many of the members. Most of them had been non vegetarians before coming into Baba's orbit, nor had they been averse to occasional alcoholic refreshments. But now all of them were required to abstain scrupulously from all meat, fish, egg, and intoxicants of every kind. Sexual intercourse was also prohibited. They retired at 9 o'clock and were up promptly at 4. When the bathrooms resounded with screams and sputtering as the disciples subjected themselves to the cold morning bath, which was part of the disciplinary regime laid down for them by Baba. One amongst them, who suffered with chronic asthma, was no exception to this rule. Curiously enough, and this will be no news to advanced students of health, the asthma left him. They were all required to meditate for 45 minutes every morning, each one choosing his own posture and mentally repeating the name of the Almighty, which his particular religious upbringing sanctioned. At 7 every morning, after a substantial breakfast, they left for their various activities in the city. No one, whether within the ashram or outside, was permitted to read or write anything without Baba's special permission. Even the chance reading of a billboard or street sign on their way to or from work was considered an infraction of this order. Nor, one, nor were they allowed to talk with or even recognize anyone who was not of the Manzile Meme family, Manzile Meme family, except their business associates. This order, of course, had the effect of holding them securely within the protective range of Baba's influence during those early days of intense conditioning for channelship. The order was not without its particular complications, amusing in retrospect, but at the time often extremely embarrassing. One of the disciples found himself one evening in a compartment of a railway train, face to face with an old school chum. Naturally, his friend greeted him warmly, but the disciple could only turn upon him a cold, unknowing state. For a while, his friend was silenced, but continued to scrutinize the disciple, apparently wondering if he had been mistaken. No, this was certainly the friend he had known so well at school. He appealed to him. What's the matter with you, old chap? Why don't you speak to me? Don't you recognize your old friend Firoz? Unfortunately, for the miserable disciple, the train was just pulling into his station. He fled from the carriage, leaving his friend with the impression that he had gone stark mad. Baba required that all his orders be carried out promptly and without question, regardless of what the disciple was doing. If he were shaving or bathing when the call came, next page, yeah, from Baba, he had to respond at once without, however difficult or ridiculous the situation seemed. It was obedience to such an order, which Dr. Ghani describes as a most ego crushing ordeal, that compelled him and another disciple, both of Mohammedan persuasion, to walk through the Mohammedan quarters of Bombay when they had many friends, where they had many friends, with posters hanging around their necks advertising the biography of Upasni Maharaj, a non-Mohammedan master, an unthinkable procedure for a Mohammedan. Another very disconcerting practice was Baba's habit of suddenly asking what they were thinking. The disciples would try to blank their minds in order to avoid voicing an unsavory thought or to connect or to concoct a fictitious one. Baba, however, knowing what was in their minds, encouraged them to be fearless and honest, regardless of the nature of the thoughts. Relating their dreams to Baba at breakfast also provided diverting, self revealing entertainment. this is this is this is very shocking actually. If you think that Baba was around and suddenly asked in public, what are you
What were
thinking?
you thinking? Yes.
Scary actually.
Yeah.
Occasionally, the members of the ashram were ordered to fast for a day or two, but this did not exempt them from work. On the contrary, their work was increased. At other times, they were ordered by Baba
find hundreds of blind and lay beggars and bring them to Manzilami for the purpose of feeding and clothing them. Since beggars are plentiful all over India, this seemed an easy order to fulfill. But Baba did not want the able bodied ones, only those who are disabled. This made their task more difficult. It was often further complicated by the fact that the disciples who were restricted to 8 pi, that is 5 cents, a day would find themselves at the other end of the city without the necessary money for transportation home. To persuade the mendicants to follow them to a strange house where they assured them they would be bountifully fed and newly clothed, and at the same time to borrow money from them for car fare, was another of the experiences which tested both their ingenuity and fortitude. However, the required number would always be found and transported to Bombay Ashram, where they were bathed, fed, and clothed. In this service, Baba took the leading part, and as some of them departed, he garlanded them with flowers to the astonishment of his disciples and the bewilderment of the beggars. But behind the puzzling performance of Baba's is deep significance. When we were in India, he told us that whenever he works with large number of beggars, he is affecting a change in the economic structure of the world. This is but one of the many examples of the way he uses outer and visible symbols to effect needed changes in their individual or mass consciousness. His every act is in truth a sacrament.
So,
Yeah.
what do you think he's doing with the economic structure when he's dealing with beggars?
I think if you compare from that time, the whole world has economically prospered,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a lot of economic value that has been created. The during the wars, that the machine yug जिसे हम लोग बोलते हैं, that the time of the machines came, and then during the wars it has happened. First World War, a lot of tanks and guns started getting manufactured in large number. Of course, by the second, the planes became very popular. So all these developments has that money has got distributed to people, right? So there are very lesser and lesser number of people who are too poor to survive.
Below the poverty line or whatever. So
Yeah,
basically,
yeah. Use those
move,
words. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, move people from abject poverty and move
Correct.
large portions of, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we can make out. But what Baba meant, he only knows.
We don't know. Yes, we don't know. Correct.
He
Correct.
only knows. Yeah,
It's just
it's our
speculative on our part.
interpretation.
Correct.
Limited. Yeah. Sex. During the Bombay period, all the fundamental life problems came into the foreground of consciousness and were used by Baba as opportunities for spiritual instruction. Sex, being one of the least understood of man's problems, is quite naturally became a subject for consideration. Though the paramount enjoyment of the carnally minded is sexual intercourse, its pleasure, as Baba points out, is evanescent, evanescent and bestows no lasting satisfaction. Compare the fleeting gratification of earthly delight with the permanent satisfaction of spiritual bliss, and this will be readily apparent which is of the greater value. Wow. Baba explains neither the gratification of sexual desire nor in its repression is to be formed any lasting happiness, though a life of restraint comes closer to the ideal than a life of indulgence. True lasting freedom is attained only through freeing of the mind of all cravings. To achieve this, intelligent understanding and direction of the life force is essential. The integration thus arrived thus arrived at differs from both repression and indulgence in that it is motivated by a spiritual impulse and leads to an enduring inner renunciation of sexual craving, a spontaneous redemption which is not dependent upon the fickle tyranny of the conscious mind for its constancy. Yeah, it's a beautiful phrase, the last one. Mind wants the constancy. It wants to remain involved in its functions.
It needs constant
And
indulgence in.
yeah, constancy. It's a beautiful word. I liked it. Fickle tyranny of the conscious mind for its constancy. Marriage. For an average person, Baba advocates monogamous marriage based on mutual love and respect. The, oppor- the opportunity offered by such a marriage for the interplay of temperaments and mutual adjustment can best teach man the discipline of self control, which are indispensable for his higher development. In this respect, and also in Baba's teaching, that absolute mental control of the sexual phase of love is an essential part of any wholesome marriage relationship. The psychology of Dr. Fritz Kunkel bears a striking resemblance to Baba's perception. Dr. Kunkel points out that one of the psychological maturity may be measured by one's ability to wait or bear tension, during which period of waiting he advocates the cultivation of the most subtle spiritual aspect of love relationship, thereby deeply enriching the lives of both man and woman. This is the harmony with Baba's statement that only when sex companionship is accompanied by a sense of mutual responsibility and spiritual idealism can the lustful aspects of love be sublimated. In marriage, the partners are compelled by force of their close daily association to tackle the whole complex problem of their personalities rather than the relatively simple problem which the extramarital relationship involves. In any kind of temporary relationship, people inevitably play up to a role, usually the role which the other party imposes upon them. Only when both parties are deeply committed to permanent union do they allow all facets of their characters to become evident. Only then are they likely to have the courage to let their hair down. Without this commitment to permanency in their relationship, it is impossible for man and woman to be themselves and to assume the responsibility for the inevitable adjustments which being themselves requires. For those who are thus able to face and understand themselves, marriage becomes a valuable medium through which the partners may become conscious of their latent tendencies and weaknesses. They mirror for each other the dormant personality characteristics of which, in the beginning, they may have been wholly unconscious, and as they incorporate those hidden dormancies into their conscious life, they become better balanced instead of lopsided.
It's an interesting line here. Only when both parties are deeply committed to permanent union do they allow all facets of their characters to become evident. Only then
Yeah.
are they likely to have the courage to let their hair down. Without this commitment to permanency in their relationship, it is impossible for a man and woman to be themselves and to assume the responsibility for the inevitable adjustments with which being themselves requires. It's a very profound point. It's
Yes,
contra
yes.
to, yeah,
Correct.
it's contra to what we know of relationships, but I think she has uh,
Mm.
explained it beautifully. Uh, in the sense that only when you you there should, I mean, there should be a um, inevitability in the relationship that helps you let your hair down, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Hair down is also kind of a bit of a surrender, if you may use that word.
Correct. It's a very American
What's it?
expression,
Yeah,
but
Yeah,
basically it
yeah,
means that be natural, be comfortable
yeah,
in your skin,
yeah.
do
correct, correct,
exactly whatever
correct.
you want to do without
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah. With
Yeah.
no hidden windows.
Ha. No faking.
Yeah, the
Everything
Zohari
is
window,
as
Zohari window, we may use that word, that exercise. There are no
correct.
hidden, there are no blanks.
Correct. Just give it to me as it is. Like, yeah.
Then, then too, through the mutual selfless sharing of joys and sorrows, the participants in true marriage may reach ever higher levels of love until finally the possessive passion of the early days is replaced by the more profound emotion of selfless and expansive love. The partners of such a sublimated union are eventually carried so far along the spiritual path that they need only the final touch of the perfect master to lift their souls into the sanctuary of eternal love. Among Baba's disciples are both married and unmarried men and women, though in the early days of training of the Indian men, strict celibacy was required of them. Towards the end of the Bombay period, however, Baba asked his men if any of them wished to be married, and he assured them that whatever their decision, it would not retard their spiritual development. Only one man elected to marry, but he, his wife, and 6 children are among Baba's closest ones. Ramju?
I don't know. 6 children? I don't know. Maybe.
Ramju, maybe. Ramju. Yeah, Ramju was married. His son used to give a lot of talks in Mumbai Center.
Abdullah. Yeah, yeah,
Abdullah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, anybody would like to read?
Yes, I think I was going to propose the same.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So we start celibacy. To one like Baba, who knows the spiritual reasons for the physical separation of the sexes, man's preoccupation with sex is seen to be highly exaggerated and distorted. He points out that the traditional attitude of lust, ingrained and fostered in the mass consciousness, is responsible for most of the ills and aberrations that are such a sorry byproduct of modern life. For the serious spiritual aspirant, he advocates a life of strict celibacy rather than marriage, providing restraint comes to the disciple easily, without any undue sense of self repression. The former life experience of the disciple would, of course, determine this. Apart from its higher spiritual implications, the value of celibacy lies in the habit of restraint, with the detachment from the body and independence of person which it induces. I couldn't fully understand. Could somebody explain what was
Or I can
So
read again.
she's talking about restraint being the important part of restraint, and also seclusion or solitude, detachment from the body, and independence of persons. So he's talking about that being an important part of spiritual practice. But feel free to read it again if you want.
Yeah, I think I will do it again.
Please.
One like Baba, who knows the spiritual reasons for the physical separation of the sexes, man's preoccupation with sex is seen to be highly exaggerated and distorted. He points out that the traditional attitude of lust ingrained and fostered in the mass consciousness is responsible for most of the ills and aberrations that are such a sorry byproduct of modern life. For the serious spiritual aspirants, he advocates a life of strict celibacy rather than marriage. I'm not sure this is correct because just previous para, didn't we read that he gave choice to
Yeah,
his
I think this
disciples?
is there. Sunil, I think even I have read this somewhere else also.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the ultimate thing. But for the normal people, I mean that's like 0.001% of the serious who want to go into the path. But normally, is he recommends marriage and marriage with those percepts that he has explained here and in the discourses.
I see. For the serious spiritual aspirant, he advocates a life of strict celibacy rather than marriage, providing restraint comes to the disciple easily without any undue sense of self-repression. The former life experience of the disciple would, of course, determine this. Apart from its higher spiritual implications, the value of celibacy lies in the habit of restraint, with the detachment from the body and independence of the person which it induces. Nor does the life of
Yeah, ultimately, we have to be celibate even in the marriage. So, I mean, if you read it holistically,
Mhm.
celibacy in marriage. So you get into sex of act only for the procreation of a generation, the kid. Otherwise, you remain celibate even during the marriage. So sex is not for pleasure in that sense.
Mhm. I understand.
That's what it comes to.
Correct.
Okay.
And in fact, discourses also says exactly what
Yes. Yes.
you said. Yeah.
Okay, I go further. Nor does the life of spontaneous celibacy promote any impairment of health. On the contrary, if celibacy is achieved and practiced with full understanding of its creative role, it not only enhances the spiritual growth of the disciple but also results in greatly improved health. However, the full benefit of celibacy is not realized until true detachment has been attained. And this is possible only when the soul has been awakened by a love so divine, so transcendent, that the spontaneous and permanent renunciation of craving becomes its natural byproduct. Interesting. Divine love, pure love, which is the keynote, and very heart of Baba's message, is always a grace from God or the Master. It has only one desire to become united with the Divine Beloved. Such withdrawal of consciousness from all lesser cravings leads to unalloyed purity. In the flame of its intensity, all inferior thoughts and emotions are consumed. The energies are focused upon the core of one's being, the God Center, which to the disciple of a perfect master is synonymous with the soul of the master. This is one of the major reasons why conscious contact with the living manifestation of Godhood with a perfect master is essential. Only full hearted love can bring about a spontaneous rededication of the personal will to the divine. Thus, the master becomes the living portal into the infinite life of God. For the spiritual mass quickenings of mankind, the living presence of Godhood upon earth is likewise essential. The dynamic, tangible manifestation of God in human form acts like a celestial magnet, that draws mass consciousness from the mundane to the spiritual. The abstract approach to God is reserved for the very few, and even they, before they can reach the final goal, require the services of one who has made the great transition and can draw their consciousness across the borderline which divides the finite from the infinite. Alone, no man can accomplish this ultimate surrender. Until the moment of liberation, the mind of the individual must be used as the medium for such liberation. It must consciously focus energies, must master and direct them if realization of God is to be achieved. Much of this process the aspirant may carry out by his own efforts if his desire and will for union with God is strong enough and his single mindedness invulnerable. But eventually, the moment arrives when the mind has fulfilled its function. And together with the sense of duality must be transcended if we would become one with God. Herein lies the difficulty. The conscious mind may be willing, even eager to let go, but the subconscious collective mind, in which resides the individual and racial impressions and tendencies of past, draws us back into the world of illusion and separative existence. It is true that before being drawn back, one may experience infinite powers, knowledge, and bliss for days, weeks, or months. But unless the mind's impressions and tendencies have been permanently obliterated, they sooner or later pull the pilgrim back into finite existence. Anybody wants to comment on this? Or
No.
anybody? No comments?
And yeah, no comments from my side.
Sanjay ji, any additional explanation on that para?
Actually, I was off 30 seconds. So I did.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking, we as human beings, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we make some promises to ourselves and then break them later. We are highly spiritual at some points, and then sanskaras pull us back into very simple things
Yes,
like
yes, yes.
greed for food,
Absolutely
lust for
correct.
food, right? And then
Yeah.
I was vegetarian for a year, and now I'm eating everything, and I'm eating more than I would normally eat. The moment I see some delicious food, I went yesterday. I went quite some distance to eat something. So it's all sanskaras, I think, that pull us back.
Yeah.
Before the soul can be free to enjoy the infinite prerogatives of Godhood, the final release from the domination of the mind must take place. Like a blinding flash, this comes upon one, and in that infinite moment, every thought, every feeling, every concept is blotted out. Consciousness remains but consciousness of nothing, neither consciousness of self nor consciousness of God. Simply blank, stark nothingness. It is a terrifying experience. No matter how courageous the soul may be, no matter how determined may be the will to pass through its abyss of annihilation, the instinctive mind recoils from it, and before one can muster the determination to see it through, the moment has passed and the soul finds itself back into its comfortable, long accustomed, finite abode. Interesting. If, however, at this point one has the good fortune to be the disciple of a perfect master of consciousness, one may be literally drawn through his final experience, providing the love for master and the confidence in him is sufficiently self-consuming. With such a love, one is willing to undergo any trial, any agony of soul, in order to become one with the beloved. Beyond this moment of terrifying nothingness lies the eternal realm of blissfully conscious God.
Okay. Okay, well,
Sanjay ji, you have to mute your mic, but I heard some birds. I don't know which side. Was it Singapore or Bombay?
I think it was Bombay. And every time the
Nice.
background
Yeah,
noise,
yeah. I was standing in a balcony, so there were birds around. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay, okay.
I
Uh-huh.
remember Adrak Wali Chai. I'm craving for it. Okay.
One
Does
more craving, huh?
one more craving.
Sanskaras.
Yeah, I know. So we'll get out of it. Yeah. Thus, the path of liberation is open to the aspirant either in marriage or in celibacy, provided that the way of life chosen is regarded as a spiritual enterprise. I read again. Thus, the path of liberation is open to the aspirant either in marriage or in celibacy, provided that the way of life chosen is regarded as a spiritual enterprise. The road one chooses is natural.
This is very punch. This is a punchline actually.
Mm,
Spiritual enterprise. The life is an
provided
So
spiritual.
the way
actually,
of
Rama
so
also
even in
uses this line.
discourses,
Yeah. Yeah.
correct, even in discourses, the three chapters on marriage and sex. So there also he says the same, right? So he says as long as the man and the woman are using the opportunity of living with each other towards furthering their spiritual enterprise, to borrow this word again, it is the best. But it's also the biggest opportunity for working off your sanskaras. So I mean, to beat a broken record, sanskaras determines everything. So you get what you are best required to handle
Mm.
or face more than handle.
The road one chooses is naturally determined by the background of previous lives. In either case, the seeker becomes progressively free of craving and desire, and his longing for divine truth increases until he achieves the final goal of liberation, of life liberation. Manzil memories, aware of the need of keeping alert, the interest of his disciples in those early days of his first ashram, Baba saw to it that their life was not monotonous or dull. He sometimes took them to the theatre and motion pictures, while at home he encouraged various indoor and outdoor games. Through religious devotions and singing of spiritual songs also had though religious devotions and singing of spiritual songs also had a place in their daily routine, Master's method of training his 20th century disciples to function in the world without losing contact with him followed no traditional pattern. His technique confirms that he has often told us what he has often told us that he is training us to take our place in the world, yet not to be of it. In the close relationship that existed between the disciples and Master, Baba never lost an opportunity to drive home a valuable lesson. One evening, as they were playing a new game of marbles in the compound, under specially provided electric lights, another of Baba's soul testing dramas was staged. Ramju, a married disciple, had been rather concerned about the health of his only son, who had been ill for some time. He was also troubled about his wife, who was pregnant. On this evening, he arrived at the ashram, visibly worried because he had not heard from them. He went out to the compound where Karthik.
Yes.
Could you scroll down?
Yeah.
Where all the disciples were absorbed in the new game. Baba, as usual, was in a happy mood until Ramju arrived. Instead of the cheerful word with which he always greeted every member of the ashram family, he gave Ramju a grave look. Then he turned to another disciple and asked, "Shall we tell him now?" Replying in an equally serious tone, the disciple suggested it would be more considerate to give Ramju the news after dinner. After a few minutes later, Baba said, "I think it will be better to tell him about the telegram now." Then he told Ramju bluntly that his son had passed away. Scarcely before Ramju could react to this sudden shock, Baba ordered him to join the others in their game. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
shocking.
There have been only just two phases. One was this phase, another was also similar phase during the new life, where the rules were very, very strict. And there is a story of one Sardarji, I forgot his name, and he had his marriage of a daughter, and he was not able to attend, and he was crying, and Baba had to send him back from the new life.
Yes,
Yeah. I think that happened in Satara, if I'm not wrong, where Baba was in Satara during those periods. Yeah. Jai Baba.
was it Dr. Daulat Singh or somebody else?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. It must
Dr.
be him.
Daulat Singh. Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, he keeps asking about the marriage, and then finally, Baba. Yeah, and I remember that. Yeah.
I wonder why. Sometimes I wonder why my grandfather didn't go into the new life, but he was close with Dr. Daulat Singh in Srinagar. Baba's one of the first few disciples. Oh, I have no answer. I don't know.
Mm, mm.
Okay.
But, Sunil, Jay Baba, I think that for the new life, Baba only invited certain number of people.
Yeah.
So there was a restricted number of people. I don't think I heard your grandfather's name being part of that list.
Yeah. It
So I
wasn't.
think that, yeah, so it was not meant to be because Baba had chosen certain people that he felt, who were whatever, he has his own way of deciding who can
Yeah. Yeah.
come for the meeting and who he can choose. So, and I think regarding, I think the marriage thing, celibacy and all that, um, see, the easiest way is if you're with a perfect master and you're single, like the way the Mandali was, that is probably the most.
Amma, are you saying something? We can't hear.
Yeah. I lost the audio.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Oops. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. No, I was saying that in terms of marriage and, the easiest way of being celibate is being with a perfect master. And because you are under his tutelage. The other one is like if you're away from the perfect master, if you're able to be obedient, that is also good. Number three is even if you're married, and as rightly said, if both the partners are able to follow the same spiritual journey, which I think is very unique, I think not both the partners are on the same wavelength and frequency. I've seen with many Baba lovers and couples that one person might be much more intense than the other. So it's a very difficult role to play, as such. But I think that being a householder is the best form of challenge. And every saint has said that being a householder and following the spiritual path is the best way. Because very few people can have the control or being celibate. So that is what I have understood. Jai Baba.
I mean, horses, of course, your expression, different, what is the other expression you use? Different strokes for
Different strokes
different
for different
folks.
folks. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think from each person's personal perspective, it may differ. But the bigger message is yes, it's an opportunity, but also I'm talking about marriage now. It's an opportunity to use it to square off obviously and work on a lot of your sanskaras. And if you can do it in harmony and in collaboration with your partner, it's amazing. It's I think a blessing. It's a lot of your past sanskaras that are coming to pay you back in good time, right? So that's the way I see it.
Hmm.
Correct, but there is also one challenge we are seeing now in the current generation, the Z generation or whatever, that a lot of the young people who are now working, having professional jobs, many of them are not planning to get married, not to have children. Not
Yeah.
many, but at least that is the trend nowadays. And of course,
Yes.
these people have other reasons for that. They don't have that spiritual quotient. I think that is where the society, I think the young people need to be awakened to the fact that there is something called spirituality, which is about leading a material life, spiritually speaking, because you're on planet Earth to know yourself. So I think that vacuum is now big, and we are seeing a lot of mental problems, mental diseases all over the world, especially with the younger generation. So this is something that needs to be addressed. Jai Baba.
Absolutely. I think you said it. I mean, I agree with the trend that you're seeing, and I agree with your prescription as well. What has to be done is just a greater awareness of true values. Go read discourses and figure out your life in the right way. It's a chance you've got on planet Earth. Okay, any thoughts, Ashish?
Hmm.
Any thoughts, any reactions, any other points before we can continue for a few more minutes and wrap up?
I just joined. Sunil raised one
Okay.
point about the vegetarian and non-vegetarian food, and after that
Okay.
again I just disconnected and I just rejoined again. So
Okay.
I remember I asked this question to Mandali long time back. If eating vegetarian or non-vegetarian food, is it good or is it bad? So what they told me that time, like, if you're eating from your childhood without any without any kind of, what I will say, it's too affection. If I'm not eating it very affectionately, or if I'm eating it from childhood, it's fine. It's totally fine. But
Excellent.
if I'm starting it even at my younger age, and if I'm getting too much craving and all, then it's a problem. That's what he told. That's it's a long time. I don't remember the exact answer. He given a very big answer that time, but that was the shortest thing which they told me, which I remember.
Do you
I,
remember who it was?
Jai Baba.
hmm.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Yeah. Yeah, what I was trying to say is that the vegetarian, non-vegetarian. Yes, I think the explanation that the previous person said is correct. But also, I think that if you look at it from a evolutionary point of view, human beings are omnivorous. You know, and if you look at the evolution from the gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans, most of them are vegetarians or omnivorous. And I think our jaw is suited more for vegetarian. Number two is that, in terms of the sattvic, tamas, rajas, gunas. So when you eat simple vegetarian food, the sattvic gunas will get much more influenced. The thing with meat is that meat is a product of an animal which has animal sanskaras. And plant sanskaras basically are very, very, non impressionable, you can say that. Whereas animal sanskaras are very, solid. That is where we get our lust, greed, and anger. So indirectly eating meat can affect one's physiology, psychology. Of course, it also depends on our sanskaras. If you're just eating for fulfilling your hunger, then it's different. But if you're going to eat it as a form of desire, then definitely there would be a sanskaric impression on that. For example, if you live in Tibet, the Tibetan monks, there is no, you can't grow plant food as much. So they have to eat meat. So in that regard, I think it's okay. So it is very contextual where you have veg and non-veg food. But I think for people like us who live in the plains, Preferably, if we are in the spiritual journey, a sattvic diet is beneficial, unless it is for dietary purposes. Jai Baba.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Then in that case, yeah, in that case, if you're talking about the desires, if I'm putting lots of ghee, right? If I'm putting lots of butter, because I like that taste, then in that case, that is also not good, right? Yeah, non-veg is a
Yes,
different
it's
thing,
not.
right? So
Yes.
if
So
I'm
anything,
eating,
anything that's craving linked, or
yeah,
like your Mandali response, which is attachment linked. So live
yeah,
to eat versus eat to live, right? So if you're eating just to stay, just to meet the basic physiological requirement, then you're in a better position than, hey, what can I have special today? Hey, what's the next thing? Or crave for a particular dish in a hotel. So that's obviously on the negative side, on unintelligent action. Intelligent action is, hey, give me whatever. I'm happy with it. Thank you, God, for what you gave me on my table today, and I process that and go on life. Right. So it's so ghee. The way you said it, yes, you're actually doing it in the wrong way. Sunil, you were saying something.
Well, uh, sorry, I was just going to mention that the ghee part is also contextual. For example, there's nothing wrong in enjoying or tasting food, but there's a subtle
Yeah,
difference between enjoyment and being attached to it. And the second part is, if the ghee is going to affect your physical or mental health, then it's not good. But if the ghee is not going to affect your health, but is you're going to enjoy it, that's okay. So I think it is a very contextual aspect when you're
correct.
doing a particular thing. Jai Baba.
Absolutely. And Baba
and
says there's nothing wrong in enjoyment. It is the problem is in attachment to that experience, right? So if you're so yeah, but it's a fine balance. It's
one
a
last thing
balance
I
that your
said about
mind
the
can play tricks. Yeah.
I said it's about the mandali, but I don't know it's exactly mandali because we're sitting in the group, and
Yeah.
those days many people were alive. So that statement I
So
will just take it back. It was mandali, so it's not, maybe it may not be the mandali said.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was a
Okay.
group of
so
old people who were sitting and discussing.
it's like exercise. If I do exercise, am I attached to my gross body too much? Is that kind of question actually?
Yeah.
Through
So
our
I
experience.
I do exercise for fun. I feel happy. It gives me that, or I am attached to my body shape and how do I look to others. I mean, it's just that kind of subtle difference here.
Contextual.
I mean, similar,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
similar
the
thing,
that's the
Yeah,
contextuality, right? So
yeah,
you
yeah,
just
yeah.
enjoy the taste of ghee, and then you don't mind if you're not don't get ghee. If the test is, if you can't, you're not able to live without it, you think about ghee all the time during the day, you're dying to have the next meal with ghee, you crib if you don't get ghee, then it's a problem. But if you just enjoy and you remembered it at the time of service of your meal and say, hey, I need a spoon of ghee on my thing because it's so lovely, I think that's harmless. Thanks for
I have
pointing that out,
extended
Kama.
question. I have extended question after we
Okay.
stop the recording.
And Baba wanted us,
Okay.
Baba wanted us to be natural also, and enjoy
Sunil,
life. He didn't want us to be morons, like dead bodies moving around.
Sure.
Yeah, Baba.
Yeah, Baba. Sunil, you were saying
Yeah.
something before
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Ashish. Yeah.
yeah. I was saying that our experience, we are Kashmiri Brahmins, supposedly pure non-veg people, right? To that extent. Uh, so meat and non-veg is in the palate always considered. If you eat vegetarian food, they say it's the guy's poor or something is wrong with him, kind of a thing. We switched to vegetarian diet since last 1 year, eating very sparingly when we are overseas. So the experience is like when you're vegetarian, your mind is freed of a lot of things. You feel lighter in your body, so digestion is easy. Um, you are not really thinking about food all the time. Not like you dislike vegetarian food, but it's food. There's one burden less in your mind. While when you're non-vegetarian, you're constantly thinking of food, which one to eat, which dish to eat, what should I cook, should it be this one or that one. It becomes a burden on your mind. Like I said yesterday, I went very far to eat something. I wouldn't do that for vegetarian food. So it
Yeah, yeah.
in real life, these are real life experiences between vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism, right? So vegetarian diet makes you lighter both in body and mind somehow. I feel, although
Correct.
non-veg gives you more pleasure.
Yeah, it's not just veg and non-veg. It's also the way you cook it. Even vegetarian food, you can cook very tamasic, with a lot of masala and
Possibly,
ghee and butter.
possibly, possibly.
So, and there was an article which came in Glow long time back. I don't know if I will be to trace it on what Baba recommended to eat. He always recommended to eat light food. Simple food. In initial days, even the dal was not even fried.
Correct.
Uh, if you remember when we were reading Mehra, there are money
Yes.
talks on.
Mm.
So simple food, and typically, as we all must have experienced, if we eat simple food, we eat less.
Yes.
You
Yes.
don't. That gluttony part goes away from our
Absolutely.
craving. It's typically happens at my place also. Where there's a non-veg, you eat extra couple of
Yeah,
chapatis.
you end up eating extra.
Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, scientifically also, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And if your tea is okay, but you must make the tea, light, as we get in MPR.
Right.
But many times we make that masala tea with, it just become dark brown, and we enjoy
Yes.
in a big cup and all that. So even that is given. Like brinjal, he has said that it should not be eaten.
Hmm.
So certain things are
Yes.
there in that article. That what they
I
call
never understood what's wrong with brinjal.
eggplant.
Why?
It's
Why?
just that Baba has said eggplant is brinjal, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what's the explanation behind?
There is no explanation. It's Baba's message. That's all. There's no explanation. He has said about eggs. He has said about milk. Milk
Mm.
is good to eat and all that. So we should try to take out that article and read
Mm.
just to get some better clarity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Jai Baba, are we still reading or?
No, I think we'll wrap up because I think we have more than a page before the next section, and
Okay.
we are almost. Oh, we are well past time. Sorry. So we can stop at this time. And I think it was an interesting personal contextualizing of all the things Baba has said. With that, I will stop recording, uh, and we can hang out for a couple of minutes.